هذا بس. السلام عليكم. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and my name is Dr. Walid Tamimi. I am the consultant biochemist and represent the Saudi Society of Clinical Chemistry. This session is organized by the Saudi Society for Clinical Chemistry on behalf of President of the Society. I'm welcoming all of you and hope you will gain from this session about the quality, the information that will be delivered from our distinguished speakers. The first speaker is Dr. Zaid Asiri. He's a consultant biochemist, has graduated from the Saudi Commission for Health Specialist Board in Clinical Chemistry. He also has a master's degree from Al Faisal University and expertise in quality compliance and working as a consultant at Prince Sultan Military Medical City. Dr. Zaid will talk today about the quality and stability of newborn samples, and welcome to giving this lecture.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Walid, for the kind introduction. As mentioned, my talk today is about the quality and the stability of newborn screening samples. So first, I will give a brief background about the newborn screening. What screening? Well, newborn screening is a preventive public health measure where we test the newborns after birth, usually between 24 to 72 hours, 1 to 3 days. We collect the sample shortly after birth, and we conduct testing for metabolic disorders. Now, these disorders usually could be asymptomatic during birth, and thus the early detection will help us to prevent any severe complications before the symptoms arise, and some of these symptoms can okay, take your time. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, we apologize for people joining us online. I hope we resolve the issue now. So as I mentioned, the newborn screening program is a preventive public health measure. We test the infant shortly after birth, usually 24 to 72 hours. We collect the samples and we do the newborn screening test. These tests allow us to have an early detection for the metabolic disorders. These metabolic disorders, although most of them appear asymptomatic during birth, however, once the symptoms arise, they can have an irreversible effect and very severe complications, and in certain cases can even lead to death. So early detection is a very key element in the process of newborn screening. As I mentioned, these disorders are also could be typically genetic, metabolic, congenital. As I mentioned, they could be also symptomatic during the first days of birth. So why we are doing the newborn screening? Well, it improved the health outcome. As I mentioned, when detected early, these diseases can prevent the severe complications and also will have an improvement on the lifestyle of the affected individuals. It is also cost effective, even though these programs takes a lot of resources and cost to establish. On the long term, the process of treatment and managing these patients who are affected by this disease and not detected during early diagnosis will have from a financial point of view, will have a very high cost when compared to detection. It is also important for family planning and genetic counseling in individuals who have already have a patient or have a baby who's suffering from one of these disorders. And also it provides us with a peace of mind from the physician and the parent. You know, when they have even though the most of our samples come not remarkable or negative for these disorders, it provides them with a peace of mind that their baby has been tested as soon as birth and they have negative results. And it also have a considerable amount on reduction in mortality. Again, we go back to the early detection, which will prevent these severe complications that eventually lead to death in certain cases. However, newborn screenings have certain challenges. For example, false positive cases. False positive cases, they can lead to unnecessary stress, both on the patients and their families, and even in the healthcare, and also provide us with unnecessary interventions. There are some ethical concerns about the informed consent and what should be done with these data we have collected. The decisions about which conditions include in the screening committee that is deciding which disorder to be included in this program based on statistic and our demographic data. Also, you have to ensure equity in the process of access to the screening. And even after the access to the screening and you have positive results, you need to have subsequent necessary treatments. And these all are necessary to have and to ensure it's available. Now we will talk about the effectiveness of the newborn screening and how the sample quality is related to that. A good sample quality will provide us with accuracy, which is the main goal of a newborn screening program, is to accurately identify these diseases. And the poor quality, as we mentioned, can lead to bad results. Also, the timely diagnosis. If the sample quality is poor, you cannot have the early detection, as we mentioned. So this leads to a delay in the reporting. You have to send and request another sample, not to mention other, and delaying in the critical intervention. So what is the consequences of the poor quality of sample? It can lead to false negative. The false negative can have, if the patient might not exhibit a sign of the disorder, even though the disorder is there, but you will have a negative result based on your quality of your sample. You can also have a false positive, and this will also can indicate the presence of this disorder, which will lead to unnecessary intervention and stress, as we mentioned. Also increase in the cost because you have to redo the test and to ask for another sample and potentially extra cost even for the healthcare and the families also. The psychological impact, you know, if you have a patient and the parents receive a call, the hospital asking them to come and please bring your baby, we need another sample to be tested, it creates a psychological stress on the patient, on the parents of the patients. So what are the factors that are affecting our samples in newborn screening program? There are, first we can see one of the factors is the collection technique. This could be due to improper sampling by the nurses or the staff collecting the sample, contamination during the transport, air bubbles. Also the time collection can affect the results. As we mentioned, between 24 and 72 hours need the sample to be collected. If collected at a different age or time, this will lead to a result that is not accurate. Also the feeding time. Some of the diseases we're investigating are affected by the feeding. If we are doing the collection immediately after the feeding or before the feeding of the patient. You have also environmental factors such as exposure to light, heat, and humidity. There are certain biological factors such as hemolysis, lipemia, and icterus. Material contamination, especially in places where they have high humidity, and transportation and the storage of the samples. So these are the invalid specimens. As you can see, in the first one, we can see the specimen quantity is insufficient for testing. Now you have the filter card. It needs to be saturated from both a spot that can be corrected. As you can see, this is the first case. This is a bad specimen. The second one is appear to be scratched. The third one, it's a good spot, but they didn't allow the sample to dry before they ship it, and this causing the sample to appear this way. The fourth sample at the bottom, you can see the specimen appears super saturated. We only need one spot in each of these circles, but this, you can see they have added multiple spots, which led to super saturation. And the fifth one, we can see it's diluted. The sixth one is exhibiting serum rings. The seventh, clotted or layered. And the eighth one is no blood. This is in cases they add a very small drop. It didn't allow the blood drop to saturate all the way to the other side of the filter card. Now here we can see the appropriate collection. You can see the sample, how it is collected, how it's appropriately and a perfect circle like this and a universal shape without any clotting or layered or any other inappropriate collections. So from here we will share with you the experiment, as I mentioned, that we did. That is, we wanted to test the stability of the samples, but you need to know that these samples provide us with a very important, sometimes we receive the sample, but the patient is expired or unfortunately passed away. In some cases, this is the only sample you're going to have. So this is a very important point. Sometimes you need the sample for retrospective diagnosis from the patient. The patient is in a different region and the physician is needing the test, needing the result as soon as possible. Sometimes you need your samples to do a validation studies on your equipment. You have a new equipment, you want to test for the newborn screening, but you need to know if your samples are in appropriate condition or not. So this is just a brief introduction about the tandem mass spectrometry, which is the predominant technique for analyzing these dried blood spots. We are investigating for as known as the inherited errors of metabolism, which include the amino acids, fatty acid, and organic acid disorders. The major technique is the electrospray ionization, which is the standard method for the screening of the dried blood spot. And this is just the basic principle where the sample come and first it's scanned using the mass to charge ratio. And after at the first MS, it will pass into what's known as the collision chamber or collision cell, where the molecules, after they are getting ionized in the ion source, the ions then in the collision chamber will be bombarded by a natural gas, in this case argon gas, after the fragmentation, which will produce what's known as product ions. And these ions will be scanned again at the second MS. And this is where the name tandem MS comes from, because you have a two MS that is tandem to each other. As we mentioned, these biomarkers, the amino acid and the fatty acid, they are all susceptible to environmental conditions, as we mentioned, and heat and humidity. They also, the time-dependent degradation that is happening naturally in the sample. We wanted to share also the temperatures in Saudi Arabia ranges from 37 and 45 during the summer, and the humidity arise from 30% to 73%. This is just a general idea about the weather we have. So our aim in this study that we conducted was to investigate the effect of these different storing conditions, both temperature and the humidity, on the amino acid and the acyl carnitine at 3 different temperatures, which are room temperature, 37 degree and 4 degree. And we did that by collecting newborn screening samples that we applied them at these different storage conditions. We also tested the sample at different time intervals to see the time-dependent degradation. We did also an assessment on the effect of the condition on these amino acid and the carnitine. So we did the study for 6 months at King Fahd Medical City. We included the patients who were normal or unremarkable results. We used these specific patients for our study. We excluded patients who have abnormal results or who wanted to be repeated for their analytes. We used the new base from Berken-Elmer. We used also the kit for the assay. We also used the ABI Sykes, the LC-MS-MS, and we also used the automated puncher and an incubator to help us in our experiment. So we took 41 patients and we analyzed them at a different time interval. We share our protocol with you in a moment. We obtained the IRB for this study. We conducted a statistical analysis, including normality, the cross-Cornwallis test for multiple comparisons because we had multiple analytes with multiple conditions, with multiple temperatures. We also had the association in 5 days, 1 month, and 2 months for each one of the temperatures. So what we did first, we received the newborn sample, the fresh newborn sample. We took the measurement immediately and we established our baseline, as you can see. We tested, we have our baseline. From this same patient, we took 3 different spots and we split them into 3. 1 we incubated at 37, 1 we left at room temperature, and 1 we stored it at 4 degrees. So the same patient will have 4 results. And these results is the baseline, 37 room temperature and 4 degree. We measured them after 5 days, and then we measured after 1 month, and then at 2 months we measured. And then we compared each one of these results with our baseline to see the difference, what's happening in each temperature time dependent to the sample itself. So we did the normality test, and we also did for 37 analytes, including 14 amino acids and 23 acyl carnitine. And the test revealed the p-value for the Shapiro work was less than 0.05, which indicate our data were not following a normal distribution pattern, so we had to go to non-parametric testing. So this is just a slice of our results. As you can see, you have the baseline value, and for example, this is the first analyte, phenylalanine. You have your baseline 37 room temperature and 40 degree, and you can see, for example, there is 40% deficit after 5 days only at 37, 4 degree at the room temperature. You can see you have 4 already after 5 days. You have a difference in the results. This is an example of one of the amino acid. We did a box plot analysis. So as you can see, I'm not sure if this have laser. Okay, yes. So you can see here. This is the methionine amino acid. This is at 37 degree. So the baseline level is the same in all analytes. However, at 37, you can see already the average of in the box plot is already dropping. This is after 5 days. And after 35 days, you can see it already dropping. And at 65, it's already there. As the same happened at room temperature, you can see it. Although there are some variations, but this line indicates the average you have for the 41 analytes, for the 41 patients, sorry, and also at 4 degree. Interestingly, it's also at 4 degree because most labs, they store their samples at 4 degree, but we will go that at the discussion, we will discuss these results in detail. But you can see also at 4 degree, you have a drop in the values. So this is the box plot for the remaining. I'm not gonna go through it, but we just wanted to show you all of the work we done, and we measured for each analyte 3 box plot for the 3 different temperature for 3 different times. As you can see, arginine, leucine, or aspartate, ornithine, and everything. So here is a summary of what we did. We showed a significant, statistically significant drop in the levels of the ornithine, arginine, glutamine, methionine, aspartate, and glycine. All of these showed a significant drop. Now keep in mind that each one of these amino acid is, or a group of amino acid, are indicative to certain metabolic disorders. So these results are, let's go to the acyl carnitine now. Here is the box plot for the acyl carnitine. Okay, yes. So this is the C0, or known as the free carnitine. Here we noticed it's increasing over time, the C0. As you can see, it's elevating after the incubation, other than the amino acid that we just witnessed. But this is only the C0. You can see it over time, it's increasing at all temperatures. So this was very interesting. We'll discuss the result after. And here is the rest of the acyl carnitine that we tested. We have acetyl, propionyl, methyl carnitine, malonyl carnitine. All of these, we did the testing on them. All of these. So here is the summary. So as I mentioned, the free carnitine showed statistically high levels. It increased over time. It did not degrade. The remaining of the acyl carnitine, as we see here, they degraded. We also did a linear regression just to check for the progression over time of this. Now here is the table for the amino acid, all of the amino acid that we tested. You can see all of the linear regression we did for all the temperatures we have. So just to summarize the linear regression, so we wanted to see a good way to summarize that big table. So we divided them into groups. So the first group we have is the 37 and room temperature. We saw that group 1, they were almost stable for 2 months, which include the proline, citrulline, leucine, and valine. The second group, they decayed with linear regression, which was only the glycine. They didn't have a linear, they have a linear regression. The third group, they decayed, but without a linear regression. They were all over the place. So we can see the phenyl, tyrosine, arginine, methionine, ornithine, and alanine. And the fourth group, immediately, as you can see, the glutamine, aspartate, and arginine. The same thing happened at 4 degrees, except for the phenylalanine and the methionine. When incubated at the 4 degree, when we kept them at the fridge, you can see they just moved up, they decayed with a linear regression, which indicate they slowed down when we decreased the temperature. This is again for the linear regression for the carnitine, for the second panel we have. So we saw also the increase during the course, the free carnitine, as amino acid, these carnitines, I'm not going to go through them, but you can see them here. They decayed immediately, and these decayed without linear regression. So we wanted to talk about these results. What does it mean for us? And now, as you know, usually newborn screening programs are centralized in a different region, and we receive the samples from all over the kingdom. Sometimes it includes shipping and transporting these samples under many different conditions. Now, of course, there are guidelines and protocols, but sometimes you need to know the effect of these. So we are the first to report stability or the instability of the 14 amino acid and 23 carnitine at these temperatures, as I mentioned, including the high humidity at 5 days, 1 month, and 2 months, using a fresh samples. Because some other studies, they collected an adult sample and they just used them in their filter card, but we used an actual newborn sample just to be as accurate as we can to the real life scenario. So this is one study also. They came to the same conclusion. I'm not going to explain all of this, but you can see they also showed there is an increase in the C0, and afterwards they decreased over time, but they were using a prolonged incubation period. Interestingly, they used ambient temperature and dry environment. So here we know that only temperature was a factor because they used a dry environment in their study. We used both high humidity and high temperature. So you can see here, this indicates these analytes are affected by temperature only. And this study, they have a lower temperature, minus 18, and also under controlled humidity, and a room temperature with high humidity. They also have similar finding to us. There is, and also as I mentioned, the C0, which increased over time, came to the conclusion that, as you know, the carnitine, they are divided into C0, C2, C3, C4, depending on the length of the chain. But why did C0 increase? We needed to find out. And this led to the degradation of the other acyl carnitine. For example, the C2, the C3, they degraded and they present themselves as free carnitine, thus giving us the idea or showing it's increased in the C0. And this is also another study. So just to conclude, our finding indicated that the humidity and temperature can also affect the integrity of our samples. And we recommend that sending these samples as soon as possible to the lab under the and following the guidelines for transporting and storage guidelines, which include the appropriate temperature and also use desiccant bags to prevent the humidity, which can lead, as we mentioned, to very inaccurate results. Also, we advise using fresh samples for your validation. If you're going to validate a new equipment, please use fresh samples. This will save you a lot of time, a lot of variations that you can have in the future. This is my presentation, and thank you very much, everyone.
Hello. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for Dr. Zaid, and I would like to know a question now or at the end of the session. Okay. So maybe if anybody has any question for Dr. Zaid. Newborn screening dry blood spot now has to be taken into account that humidity and temperature are affecting, and sending this is for a longer period of time may possibly affect the sample. If anybody want to comment on this or having any you may welcome to discuss it now or later with Dr. Zaid. But for the time, if there is no more or any questions, I will introduce the second speaker, Dr. Adnan Bilali. Is in the clinical board of Saudi Commission for Health Specialists in clinical biochemistry. And he is currently working as a research monitor and working at King Fahd Medical City. He's going to talk about moving average and its relation with quality assurance. Please, Dr. Adnan.
Thank you, Dr. Wali, for kind introduction. ما يشتغل هذا. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here today to discuss cutting-edge concept that has the potential to transform quality control practices in clinical laboratories. As we know, conventional quality control methods served as well. But there is a new approach in the horizon that can take us beyond the limits of conventional practices. I am here to introduce advanced quality control strategy which using patient data to enhance accuracy and reliability of diagnostic processes. I precede my talk with this quote, which expects that patient-based real-time quality control will be the main form of quality control in the future. And during this talk, I will go over what is patient-based real-time quality control. Then we'll describe why would you use a technique based on patient results. Then we'll describe how the parameters can be calculated. Finally, I will share our experience in adapting this concept. Patient-based real-time quality control can be best understood as a dynamic technique that integrates patient data into quality control process. Actually, it's not a new idea. It's been around diagnostic laboratories since 1960. In 1965, Hoffman proposed average consecutive normal patient results, and this became known as average of normal. Then, in 1974, Paul proposed patient-based algorithm that used for automated hematology analyzer and it has been used since those days and really are successful. It's not widely used as a frontline process in clinical chemistry. This attributed to the complexity. Before we delve into the details of moving average, let's briefly discuss the current practices of quality control. In a global survey conducted by Westgard, this survey revealed that quality control practices remain mired in old habits and wasteful tradition. According to this survey, the predominant practice is using two standard deviation limits and repeating out of control and accept it if they repeat into control again. In fact, this is not improvement, this is regression to back. Also, in this example from the survey, which described the frequency of quality control running per day, the standard of the world is running a QC once time a day, with another quarter choose to running QC materials twice a day, with another fifth running 3 times per day. And this is considered common practice. So common practice doesn't always confirm to be good laboratory practice. Also in this example, which describe how they respond to out-of-control events, a third of laboratories choose to repeat all the patient samples in the run, which that theory and textbook tell them to do. And a majority of laboratories are little more selective, which are trying to repeat selected patient results at the moment of error, or trying to repeat selected patient results that could be the most impacted by the failure. So the question is, does these practices have been changed? Also from this survey, we can conclude that quality control practices need to be improved. And most of laboratories become compliance-oriented rather than striving for continuous quality improvement. Why you may use a patient sample as a form of quality control technique? Because that QC materials are scientific materials, so are either impractical or unavailable for a particular assay. Also, patient results may detect an issue that another form of quality control materials which cannot. As I mentioned before, the problem that arises with conventional QC techniques is the frequency, which running a QC sample once a day or more times. So there is no assessment for QC between these times. Also, with patient sample, we can assess lot-to-lot variation and some of pre-analytical factors. All of this are raising unanswered questions. What's happened between QC events, and how we know if we are stable or not? Also, what's the optimal QC frequency? Now we're comparing both forms of quality control. With patient-based real-time quality control, every patient result, unless have been excluded because an outlier, will be part for the quality control process. So each result will be added to the mean or the median. Also, patient sample provide you some insights in pre-analytical phase error, whereas in statistical quality control, it's mainly focused in the monitoring analytical phase only. In statistical quality control, you can able to detect imprecision for the assay by looking to number of QC rules, whereas in patient-based real-time quality control mainly focus onto the bias. How to optimize and validate both type of QC also differ. The optimization and validation in moving average, it involves simulation or trial and error. Whereas the optimization in statistical quality control, it's mainly using Six Sigma and can be validated with using power function graph. Now we take into account some consideration that you need to think about when considering moving average. Firstly, consider the analyte that you want to use in moving average. You need to understand the biological variation of that analyte. Also, you need to understand the analytical system that would be used to measure it. What's the analytical variation of that assay? Also, you need to understand the patient population that you are going to have in your laboratory. Are there some variation because you have got hospital population patients, are either inpatient or outpatient, or there's some variation of analyte because different type of patients seen at different time per day or per the week. Also, you need to understand the capabilities of your laboratory information system. Can that system extract the data? Can it do the calculation? Can it do the calculation in real time? You need to have deep understanding of these three parameters before you're starting. Then consider the optimization technique. Therefore, you need to extract some historical patient data and look for the distribution. Then consider the technication limit and quality control limit, and then applying the model. Important concept and terminology that involved in every moving average procedure. The concept of technication limit, it's sort of technique that used to exclude extremely patient results. And the block size is the actual number of samples that needed for calculating the algorithm. There are a variety of algorithms used in moving average, for example, mean or median, and some sort of special algorithm such as X-bar and bull algorithm. The control limit, it's the same for that used in conventional QC. When it's exceeding, that means we are out of control now. Those analytes with tight biological variation are best suiting for moving average. Also, with some assay with 6 sigma less than or equal to 4 are best to be monitored by using a moving average. Simply, moving average is averaging selected number of patient results in one point, and it's updated when a new results are received. In the next few slides, I will share our experience in applying moving average in King Fahd Medical City. Risk-based algorithm was designed that used for determine when internal quality control is limited. Also to consider moving average as a supportive quality assurance tool. Furthermore, when less than 2 results were generated per the analyzer per the day, the test will be excluding from the moving average. This can be starting by examining the internal quality control protocol. Does it provide sufficient error detection capabilities for those errors considered clinically important? Therefore, we considered the moving average when internal QC it's limited in the sense that we experience rapid onset of critical errors or temporary assay failure. Also with those assays with the 6 sigma less than 4, by introducing the moving average into the internal quality control protocol, Also, by validating the moving average error detection capabilities, we have been able to reduce the QC measurement per the day. Based in the risk-based algorithm, we consider 15 analytes with total historical patient result, 300,000, 20,000 results for each analyte. Then this historical patient result will be used in preparing the simulation files. It is a CVS file that will be used in the moving average simulator. Then we designed alarm management protocol and training of staff. In fact, obtaining moving average setting is the most challenging aspect, and most of laboratories struggle to get their setting right. The steps that included in making the algorithm are which results will be included in the moving average. The second step, the applied algorithm, for example, mean or median or square root. Also, the variation within the algorithm itself. For example, using last 5 or last 10 or more results. The third step is the control limits. In contrast to conventional quality control protocol, optimized moving average procedures are more laboratory specific, as it is strongly rely on patient results that obtaining over the time. Recently, a new method has been described which all use realistic error detection. For example, simulation a specific laboratory data set. This procedure provides you insights into error detection, also provide you to select the optimal moving average procedure based on the requirement, no false alarm. The advantages of using simulation mimic the real performance. Also, it's enabled the user to choose optimized and validating moving average procedure. What's the idea of simulation? Simply, simulation is introducing a variety of biases into different positions within the data sets. Here we choose different 50 biases, 25 positive and 25 negative. And this procedure will be repeated with every block size that ranging from the block size containing last 5 results up to the block size containing the last 100 results. The simulated results will be presented in the form of bias detection curve, which used to get the optimized error detection capabilities. The coded color, each coded color represents the result needed for bias detection. In this example, we can see the optimal bias detection can be achieved by using block size that contain the last 5 results. Then the optimal moving average procedure will be presented in the moving average validation chart, which indicates the objectified moving average procedure and its uncertainty. Also, it can be used to engage moving average with traditional quality control protocol. Also, it can be used to reduce the number of quality control measurements per the day. In this example, we can see the large biases can be detected with a small number of patient results, whereas the small biases can be detected with a maximum 10 results. The bar represents the median number for patient result needed for bias detection, and the error bar represents the maximum number of results needed for bias detection. In this example, we're facing an issue in the stability of ICT module. So we consider the potassium for moving average. We're starting by simulating different block size ranging from the small one, which contain 5 results up to the large one which contain 100 results. Then the simulated results represented bias detection curve. Here we can see the optimal bias detection can be achieved with the block size that contain last 5 results. Then we adjusting our moving average protocol with the daily run, which more than 1,000 samples per day. In the moving average validation chart, we can see large biases detected with less than 5 patient results. And the small bias can be detected with the maximum 20 patient results. In moving average alarm workup protocol, some features were built in laboratory information system in order to assess the cause of the generated alarm. When the alarm is triggered, the test will be blocked. Also, the channel will be blocked by preventing the instrument from receiving any new order for that assay. The purpose from this step is to preventing reagent misuse. Every alarm should be contain important information. For example, the analyzer number and the sample ID that trigger the alarm, also the analysis time. And then by end of the day, the reports were generated which include all information about the alarm. This used to evaluation the moving average protocol. Does it provide sufficient error detection capabilities with no false alarm or not? How we integrate both forms of quality control? We're running QC materials at the beginning of the shift, and we rely on the moving average for the rest of the day. In conclusion, moving average presenting groundbreaking quality assurance tool. By harnessing the power of patient results, we can detect biases, identify the trends, and providing accurate and reliable patient results. By embracing this innovative strategy, we can provide the highest standard of patient care. Take-home message: quality control in laboratory medicine should be patient-oriented. Instead, for determining laboratory artifact, it should be reduce real risk for patients. This work, it's in collaborative with Van Rossum. He is the member of IFCC working group in moving average. Also, I want to thank our clinical chemistry team leading by Mr. Walid and Ms. Ala for their effort in successful implementation for this project. For those who are interested for further exploration, heed the references that I used in this presentation, and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adnan Bilali, who has really presented in a well scientific manner, and I think moving average is one of the things that we have to consider as an extra quality control system, especially whenever the doctors and the clinician normally contact us for sometimes when our equipment or analyzers biasing, either negative or positive, and they detect it before us, unfortunately. But moving average, I think, is one of the tools that can detect this malfunction of the analyzer before the result released to the physician. My honor also to present the third speaker, Dr. Hadi Kariri, who has a master's degree from RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia, and he's currently doing his residency in the Saudi Board on Clinical Chemistry program under the Saudi Commission of Health Specialists. He has 9 years experience in professional lab and has many positions in the chemistry, including supervisor and he in quality coordination. He's going to talk today about the influence of Delta check in auto verification and quality. Please, Dr. Hadi.
Thanks to you, Dr. Walid, for your kindness introduction. And I want to extend my gratitude to all of the Saudi Medical Sensor Association for organizing and honor me to present with you in such an event. Today, I will talk about the influence of Delta check in auto verification as laboratory quality control. Through the presentation outline, we will start with an introduction into Delta check and auto verification, followed with recognizing the benefit of both Delta check and auto verification, moving into the understanding of Delta check and the reference change value percentage and the reference limit interval, followed with how to design and validate and implement Delta check and auto verification following the CLSI guidelines. After that, we will go through Delta check implication in real laboratory, including our experiencing in King Fahd Medical City, to include the investigation tips, the consideration, discussion, simulation, verification, recommendation, and we will finish this presentation with a conclusion. Delta check is a term referred to a comparison between two consecutive results and can be defined as the process of evaluating the change between consecutive results for the same patient according to CLSI AB33. The first time has been Delta check described was by Nosanchuk and Goutman in 1974, and according to Ladinson, Delta check was used for the first time in computing science was in 1975. Delta check is so beneficial tool that help in monitoring results before the release and determining the possibility of the prediction value of true positive and false positive and false negative and true negative occurrence. Since Delta check is beneficial tool, it has two main goals, which are identifying the changes in the patient condition and identifying sample quality issues by ensuring patient safety. The other benefit, and where the starting of the implementing of Delta check was to identify the misidentifying specimen like sample collected from a wrong patient, and monitoring specimen integrity via biological variation and addressing errors that are not detectable with other methods of quality control to assess pre-analytical, analytical, and post-analytical errors such as reagent issue and pipetting probe issue. On the other hand, auto-verification is a computer-based action and can be defined as a process whereby computer-based algorithm automatically perform an action on a defined subset of laboratory results based on a defined laboratory acceptance criteria without the need of the laboratory staff manual intervention according to CLSI Auto 10. Those algorithm action could include and consider the immediate verification of a result, or repeating a test, or reflexing a test, or adding comment or suggesting a manual step, and ensure the manual intervention by laboratory staff to review the result before the verification. The purpose of the auto-verification algorithm is to ensure accuracy, validity, and improve the turnaround time of specimens. Auto verification has so many benefits that include providing employee with a proper time management and provide specimen and result with constant aspects and increase the laboratory efficiency and bring attention to results that require more action to be verified and reduce human error and medical error by consider the deterioration, decrease the stress level of the laboratory staff, and reduce problem caused by shortage of medical worker. Here, we have to go through the element that must be including in building up delta check limit, where the delta check limit or the acceptable range is the first element, which can be hours or day, depending on the laboratory acceptance criteria. The individuality index is the second element. The calculation for the reference change value percent is the third element. The algorithm pathway decision to implement delta check in the auto verification is the fourth element. And the last element is the right selection of the desired Z-score to have the percent of probability of the confidence interval. Here we will go into the consideration of designing delta check, where the consideration of a biological variation is a must. Homeostasis is the main goal by the human being, which means the ability of human to maintain a stable function of organs. So going through the fluctuation of test, is it tightly regulated, such as alkaline phosphatate and sodium, or the test is fluctuated, such as bicarbonate and albumin? The source of variation must be considered. Is it controllable, like the position of collecting sample, or uncontrollable, like an age and gender? We have to consider also in the variations the recent procedure into the patient. Could be either treatment or medication, like performing a surgery or a dialysis. Continuing with the designing delta check, we have to understand how our delta check limits are derived by identifying representative individual and gathering serial results from those individuals for the simulation. We have also to determine the delta value between those serial specimens. We have to consider determination and the test frequency. Is it highly frequent or not? We have to use the reference change value percent to assess the significance of change between the consecutive result. To calculate individuality index is the difference between the within subject biological variation to the analytical imprecision and the between subject biological variation as it's seen in the calculation below. However, tests whom having a lower individuality index consider the best test to be implemented in delta check alert. Going through the consideration of building up delta check, we have to go through selected the predictable probability of a single measurement falling multiple of coefficient variation by using the Z-score to select the suitable probability of confidence interval. We have also to combine variation of difference in two results and the amount of variation present in each result calculated by using the reference of change percent value as it's seen in the equation below. We have to consider the selecting the Z-score to ensure the desired Z-score to have a probability of percentage for the confidence interval where 1.96 is a representative of the 95% probability and 2.58 is representative to the 99th probability confidence interval. Going through a hypothetical example, in 2019, Westgard has handed and relied on the European Federation of Clinical Chemistry and Laboratory Medicine to monitor and update the biological variation database, and by selecting the desired analyte, which is in this hypothetical example is alkaline phosphatate, and going through the searching icon in the icon here and typing the desired analyte, we will have to choose the desired type of that analyte, and by clicking on search icon, we can have a web page that contains the desired analyte and type with the analytical performance specification icon and the reference change value calculation icon. And going through the analytical performance specification icon, we will have the within subject biological variation estimation and between subject biological variation estimation for that desired analyte. And by typing on the calculation, we will have a web page that includes the specification of a minimum and desirable and optimal specification of the analytical imprecision, bias, and uncertainty measurement, and total error. Following recommendation and guidelines, and selecting the desirable analytical imprecision and the bias, which are 2.6% for the analytical imprecision and 6.2% for the bias. Backing again to the search for the desired analyte, and by typing on the reference change value calculation, we will have a web page that allow us to enter the value of the result, where we have to make sure, considering either the minimum or desirable or optimal analytical imprecision, by ensuring having its value in here, and we have to consider the z-score to have the right selected confidence interval probability by entering the probability in here, and we were looking to have a 95% confidence interval. Just by clicking enter, we will have a result that include the within subject biological variation and the analytical imprecision and the reference change percent to the increase limit and the reference change percent to the decrease limit with the medium consideration, lower confidence interval, and upper confidence interval. Following the recommendation and guideline, we were choosing to have the 17.9 as the reference change percent to the increase limit and minus 15.2% to the reference change value to the decrease limit. So, after going through gathering those data, we have to consider if the test is highly demand frequent or fluctuated on the testing frequency. We have to consider also the patient location. If the patient is located in a critical care, or is it an inpatient, or the patient is exposing a recent procedure such as dialysis. And we have also to check if the patient is located in the emergency department or not. The College of American Pathology has published a paper in 2017 with a topic, Delta Check Practices and Outcome, a Q-probe study involving 49 healthcare facilities and 6,541 Delta Check alerts. And the author has recommended in this paper to use the delta reference interval with the 3 to 7 days for most analytes. However, some analytes could have about 14-day delta check limit reference interval, like mean corpuscular volume, INR, and lactate dehydrogenase. So if we went through all those considerations, we can gather the data that we use through the FALM. So we can have in a table that shows the reference change value percent to the decrease limit and the reference change value to the increase limit, as it's seen in the table, with the recommended delta check time interval with about 5 days. AFLM allow us also to perform a simulation through them. However, using software for the simulation is recommended. And going back to the AFLM website and continuing in the hypothetical example for the desired alkaline phosphatate analyte, the first result here that hypothetically entered, which represent a 120 value of alkaline phosphatate, that representative the previous result, and the second result here that have value of 160 that consider the current result, we will have a difference of change percent with about 33.3% that exceed the data that gathered earlier with the reference change value percent to the increase limit with 17.9. So, going through the plot probability, we can see on the x-axis the percentage of change between the two consecutive limits and the x-axis of a fraction of a differences. where the green colored line is a representative of the reference change value to the decrease limit, and the black colored line is a representative to the reference change value to the increase limit. The red color line is the representative of the change occurred between those two consecutive results. So the percent of change in that example was about 33.3%, which exceeds the limit of the change between the RCP percent of the increase and the decrease limit, and having such a change in percent will trigger and delta check alert will be seen. Another scenario here will be chosen to have the previous result with a 120 and the second result is 110, and just by clicking enter, the percent of change is minus 8.3, which fit in the reference change value percent that between 17.9 and minus 15.3. We will have a plot probability that can lead us with the percent of change that fit in the reference change value to the decrease limit and the reference change value to the increase limit, where a delta check alert will not be seen and the processing to the auto verification will be happening. Following those considerations, we were managing to gather data as it's seen in this table according to the desired selected analyte. By using a simulating software, we were managing and having about 53 measuring analyte and 3,000 testing episodes with a Z-score for confidence interval with a 95% confidence interval probability. We were having about we were having about 2,350 testing episodes with about 79% of tests that reported without any intervention of the laboratory staff. However, 18% of those testing episodes were requiring a manual intervention for the processing of the verification, and 3% of those testing episodes were not reported. Around 1,300 delta check alerts were seen in the simulation of the 3,000 testing episode, with about the retesting occurrence for the current specimen was about 26%, and rechecking the current specimen was 17%, and retesting the previous specimen was 4%, and rechecking the previous specimen was 1%. The analytical check and interference consideration were having about 19% of those total delta check alert, and about 32% occurrence having recent procedure to the patient condition, where a truly change would happen that considered either a treatment causes or a transfusion to the patient. So after starting to implement delta check, we have to go through few considerations where trying to implement delta check, we have to check if there is any error identified or not. If there is an error identification, going through the analytical review to check the patient location and the collection time of the sample, going through the analytical review to check if there is any change in the procedure or the assay, going through post-analytical review to check any recent procedure, contacting the medical unit should be considered. If there is no error identified or the issue was resolved, a proper action should be performed that could include result validation, sample recollection, discussing the resolving strategy, reporting for that issue, and make a proper documentation for that issue. However, if those errors were not resolved, the proper action could be either sample recollection, report issue and document that issue, contacting the medical unit for more explanation, discussing a strategy and action to resolve such an issue is a must and could be considered in if there is error identified and is not resolved. So now we were knowing about gathering data for the delta check and going to be implementing delta check and auto verification. We have to make sure the instrument status and the reagent status and the condition of the calibration and quality control are meeting the laboratory defined acceptance criteria. starting by the auto verification and going through any analytical error or any analytical flag is in this single test. If the test is passing the analytical error and analytical flag, we will go through the critical value, where if the test is not critical, it will be passing to the reference change, where the test is it fitted in the reference interval. We will have to go through the hospital information system to check the patient record data. If the patient is having a previous data, a comparison between the current sample and the previous sample to ensure the delta check according to the laboratory acceptance criteria will be conducted. And if the test is passed, the delta check, the single test is passed and auto verification will be occur. However, if there is any failure in the analytical error flag or the critical value or the reference interval, or the patient is not having the record or failure in the delta check, so test is not passing the delta check, auto verification will be held and manual intervention is required to review the sample for verification. Moving into the recommendation, starting by choosing the needed area to implement delta check and investigating the delta check alert during the simulation. Measuring the alert characteristic must be considered. Questioning is the Z-score that used is suitable or not, going through the 95% for the confidence interval and 99% for the confidence interval. Considering building up the criteria to either to be building a single test rule or a multivative rule. Always rely on tests that associated together, such as hematocrit and hemoglobin, AST and ALT, and we have to involve more than one analyte over consecutive sample. Changes in calculation parameters such as anion gap or urea to creatinine ratio. Here we have to verify our verification process, where calculating the possible alert, as we've seen in the example, is a must to check the retest and recheck and analytical check, and the truly change is a must. Once the initial auto-verification algorithm has been validated, they periodically require revalidation according to applicable regulation or as the determination by laboratory policy. Result of the initial logic validation should be compared with the revalidation to ensure there is no differences or making a progress in the validation. To finish this presentation with a conclusion, delta check helps to detect sample misidentification and sample quality issue. Delta check as a part of auto verification can assess pre-analytical and analytical and post-analytical error. When defining delta check limit, multiple sources of error must be considered. Implementing patient care must be considered when deciding to cancel or a report discrepant of the laboratory result. Here the resources that I use in this presentation, and I do recommend anyone who is planning to implement delta check and auto verification to go through those references. And thank you for your attention. If there's any question, I will be more than happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kariri, and very good lecture and presentation about delta check that we need. There is limited resources in delta check, and of course, whenever we do our own study, we will be able to understand this delta check and compare result to previous result in a seek of quality and helping our clinician to have a good result and diagnosis. Our final speaker for this session, and I'm very honored and happy to introduce my colleague, Dr. Misharil Abdulatif. He is Medical Affairs Manager at Becton & Dickinson BD company, and has obtained his bachelor degree in clinical laboratory medicine and master degree in microbiology and PhD in microbiology and immunology from USA. He's going to talk about the pre-analytical issue in the laboratory today. Please welcome Dr. Mshari.
Thank you, Dr. Walid, and I'm honored to be here as well. Basically, I will not take much of your time. I know we are a little bit behind, so I will present the detection and improvement of pre-analytical issues in clinical laboratories. This is my objectives, define pre-analytical variations and its contribution to laboratories errors. Second one, identify important guidelines. I will give also case studies and literatures on pre-analytical variations. Third one is identify common sources of pre-analytical variations, and finally describe how the laboratory can detect pre-analytical errors. So with that, we will start with the case study. Basically, we have a patient who is Mr. P, 68 years old, Hispanic man, admitted to general medicine service 2 days aerial with a diabetic foot infection. The symptoms: foot was hot, red, and quite swollen with a bad smelly toe, ulcer that was necrotic of infection. Foot worsened over the next 2 days, and he was rushed to operating room for a toe amputation. As a lab result, you notice that lactate level was ordered 5 hours after surgery, and the lactate was 10. As a reference range, 0.5 to 2.2, and the critical if it's above 4. So we're talking about a patient who is really high with a lactate, which is a 10. Keeping in mind lactate, if it's high, it's a suspect of sepsis in this case. So what happens as a puzzle, a patient received antibiotic, fluids, and surgery, and lactate still high. Doctor suspected sepsis caused by foot infection, but unfortunately it's not matching the clinical picture. Also, they gave the patient more fluids and IV antibiotics. They ordered routine lab, blood gas, chest x-ray, and repeated lactate. Okay, take your time. Okay, so going back, so the lactate was, as we mentioned, it was 10, and the suspicion is the patient with the sepsis, right? So the physicians start considering other scenarios, which is do amputations, which is removal of the toe, really cause the lactate elevation. The second one is, could the propofol from the operating room be the reason? So you can notice that the physicians start shooting randomly in here. And the lab result came back with the lactate even higher, which is 14, which is higher with the 10. And which is weird also, the CBC was odd. The white blood cells became normal, so it's not infection anymore. But at the same time, the patient is anemic. So he has anemia in that case. So they suggested that the patient has a high level of lactate. Also, he was complaining of his back. So they thought maybe he should have a typical presentation of abdominal catastrophe. Look at how they are going with this, and you will see how silly the mistake is at the end. So they ordered a CT scan for the abdominal. Luckily, the patient niece was there, and she is a phlebotomist, and she had a concern about the technique used by the order of phlebotomist and wanted to draw the sample by herself. The nurse remembered this. Could it be LR, which is lactated ringers? Basically, it's a mixture of sodium chloride, sodium lactate, potassium chloride, and calcium chloride in water. It's used for replacing fluids and electrolytes. So it's very much is like a saline, right? And when she noticed that, she said, okay, well, let's take a new sample from the opposite arm, and the result became normal. So it's IV contamination. The previous nursing or phlebotomist, they were drawing the samples from the same site where the IV was connected, and that led to the high lactate. So with that has been said, notice that the nurse who was detected the error, not the aide physician who were like shooting randomly in that case. And for that reason, I will present why it's important to focus on preanatal errors. So if you notice that it's mostly the physician sees the patients, and this is with the green box. Then we move to the blue boxes, which is I will focus on, which is the preanatal phase, starting with orders test, test, then patient preparation, sample drawing, sample transportation, sample delivery, and at the end of sample processing with the centrifugation. Moving to preanatal to anatical and postanatal, which is I will not talk about this in this session. So why are we focusing in on prenatal phase? Because most errors in the laboratory medicine happens in the prenatal phase. And this is approximately 68%. 26 of these errors had consequences of the patient. 73% of the errors could have been avoided as well. And keep in mind the majority of medical decisions, as we saw with Mr. P, are influenced by the laboratory results. So, moving forward, why ISO changed some of the preanatal sections. In 2007, you notice this is in the left, only one section. And in 2012, they have added 11 sections in there. And they have went with that is very specifically in each one of them, because the reason is the patient safety. It has been a lot of concerns regarding preanatals that can lead to wrong decisions as well, especially for the patient, also for the health facility as well. So if you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. This is the quote of what we have in here. Moving to the four most sources of errors in the prenatal errors. Well, first one is the order entry, patient preparation, sample collection and processing, transportation and storage. I will not go in details in each one of them. I will only focus on the orange errors due to sake of time. So with similar test names, this is an error source. And a possible solution for this is redesigning the requisition or using the LIS hospital or laboratory to have a footnote or a pop window to clarify more for the physicians when they order the test. And as an example of this, in the literature, we have a success story in a retrospective 6-month study at the Seattle Children's Hospital. They determined that 66% of 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D tests were ordered in error. In these cases, 25-hydroxyvitamin D was the intended test. So as a result, they informed each care provider, and this is when the intervention happens, who orders 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D to receive a communication from the lab recommending the 25-hydroxyvitamin D instead. Also, they gave the option of canceling the previous one or ordering the 25 or proceeding with the previous one. I was lucky to find the communication email as well from the lab to the physicians who they ordered. And you can notice with the orange arrow, they give them the option either if they want to cancel the 125-hydroxyvitamin D or they want to proceed with the request as previous. So with that, as a result, that comes after 7 months of intervention, authors found that 58% of 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D test orders were canceled and modified to 25 vitamin D, reducing monthly orders from 25 to less than 10. And you can see the reduction in the black bars and replaced with the white bars as well. Okay, another scenario with order entry, and this is I have seen a lot of hospitals suffering from, unfortunately, which is we're not really using the HIS and LIS properly, which is the hospital information system and the laboratory information system. I had a request from a lab director, and he called me that day. He said, I have an issue with one of units, and they always send me samples, sometimes 1 sample, sometimes 2 samples, and sometimes 4 samples. I was like, why is that? He said, I had a communication with them. We had a meeting. We did sessions as well, but still we have that issue from that unit coming with random samples for blood cultures. I was like, can I have a shadow that one of the physicians to see where the issue is? And I followed one of the physicians, and I was really awkward when they, should I stop for the Adhan or should I continue? Okay, so when I followed the physician, basically the request is in the system just as a blood culture, as you can see here. Okay, it doesn't specify that specimen type, priority, sets, and bottles. So the physician requested blood culture. I follow after that the sample. So I went to the nurse as well. I noticed the first nurse did 1 bottle, and I asked her, why is it 1 bottle? This is the unit for adults. Keep it in mind. And she said, oh, it came out at a conclusion she's a pediatric nurse, and pediatric, they do 1 bottle, okay? The second nurse, she was confused between 2 sets and 2 bottles. She thought 2 bottles as 2 sets, and in a CLSI guideline, it says 2 sets, it means 2 bottles in each hand, okay? So that's another issue as well, is miscommunication between the physician, nurses as well. So with that has been said, we talk to the IT people who are really helpful in this hospital, and they just give us more options. They give the physician, when he orders, he said blood culture, then he has to specify the specimen type. Does he want it from the central line, as an example? Priority, is it a routine or is it high? Also, the sets and bottles also involved. The lab director was happy with that, and is okay if anyone would like to take his experience from this as well. The second source of error is the patient preparation. And ISO 15189 2012 went very deep on this. And they recommended that giving a patient a card so you can have the patient be prepared on what test he has to take. And they also mentioned that do not mention something that very general, like fasting. We know that fasting from religion to religion, it varies. Some religions, they drink water, others don't. So as you can see in the orange arrow, they said you must not eat or drink anything during the 8 to 10 hours before you have the sample taken. But you may drink water. So be specific for them to have the results as you wanted. Moving forward with the specimen collection, I will just focus on the tube selection with the orange arrow on the top, showing that collection appropriate tube in correct order. We know that if you do edit a tube, as an example, before the serum or the plasma, the edited tube has a potassium, so it will lead to contamination to the serum, and you will see the potassium high, then you would think the patient has some issues, okay? So this has to be really focused as well in the hospital, because unfortunately I see a lack of knowledge in there. And another one is the urine stability. We know that with the clusters now, as an example, we had experience with one primary care sending urine sample to the cluster, right? And what we noticed that we did a little experiment using a bacteria that could be in the urine, and we left it for, with the sample collection usually from 9 a.m. or to 9 to 8 a.m. and it was received in the hospital at 4 or 5 p.m. So we're talking about approximately 6 hours. We noticed that one colony forming unit there if it's not stored and transported well, it can lead to 1 × 10⁵ and above, which means the patient will start now taking an antibiotic. The patient should have been taken care of. And this can be avoided by just adding preservatives to the collection device. Another one is processing and transportation and storage, basically with the recentrifugations. Basically, the solution for this, only centrifuge once. Because if you recentrifuge the tube, especially if it has a gel, it will break down and the component will be mixed up. Also, keeping in mind, recentrifugation will lead to hemolysis as well. So, as a solution, if you have a serum or plasma that's cloudy and you want to recentrifuge, separate it from the gel tube, then centrifuge. In this case, you are on safe side. So the detection of prenetical errors, basically we have 4. The error flags that really comes from the device. Then the critical error flags, just like the example we saw with Mr. Bean IV contamination. Then the delta checks, and I think Dr. Hadi covered this very well, so I will not cover that. And the end is the hemolysis index used to monitor presence of interference in samples, indicates cell lysis. So this is also has been approached from another lab where they contacted me for nursing from the neonate intensive care unit who were concerned about increasing level of test cancellation due to hemolysis. Just a background, updated pediatric tubes has been involved in this unit. Blood culture device manufacturer updated pediatric tube from lithium heparin. And you notice that different tube shape and size, different collection techniques also is required. The initial intervention is the blood culture device manufacturer came on site and provided multiple educations, sessions and appropriate collection techniques. Unfortunately, the same issues coming as a cancellation high because of hemolysis. So we sat in one table and we discussed this with the nurse and the physicians as well. And if you can notice who is right, is it in the left, where the nurse really concerned about the collection, saying that this is a problem with the new tube and strongly believed it's the new collection technique. And the other side, the blood culture device manufacturer suggested could be to pneumatic tube system. So to solve this, we went to the QI first. Basically, we looked at the percentage of the numbers of the sample hemolyzed in the unit divided by the total number of the sample collected in the unit. And you can see that as a study, we run the sample in the tube to the lab. And we received from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. The sample that's centrifugated and evaluated manually for any hemolysis for 8 days. This is included 1,500 samples. You can notice that 92 samples has been slightly hemolyzed, showing 61%. Unfortunately, 11% were rejected due to 17 samples heavily hemolyzed. So as a solution, we thought of setting up the centrifuge in the unit for 5 days. Also, the lithium heparin with the gel sample were centrifuged in the unit and walked over to the lab instead of using the new metabolic tube system. And with that, you can notice the collection side is 25% hemolysis, 0 cancellation, which is a good news for the lab. Unfortunately, with the transportation with the pneumatic tube system, it shows 59% hemolysis and 13% cancellation. So that's a big concern in here, and to be involved in that, we came up with the solution of this is suspected of a smaller tube size, may be more susceptible to vigorous shaking in the pneumatic tube system during transportation. So yellow tube carrier specifically purchased for the unit, which has a padded foam, as you can see in the black insert, added to add more additional stability and protection for the small tubes. When we implemented this, we noticed that the hemolysis is 48%, and the cancellation is 0%, and nurses confirmed that problem has been resolved since going live with intervention. So as a summary, I have went over the pre-critical variations in major source of laboratory errors. I went over 4 sources of errors as well and detection errors. Keeping in mind monitoring QIs is essential to reduce lab errors as well, and its compliance with ISO 15189. Successful interventions to reduce pre-critical error requires the involvement of the entire patient care provider team. So with that has been said, this is a recommendation of reading. I would recommend totally the Donald Young books, the 2012 and 17. 2012 really went in deep on these issues and how to identify it, how to analyze it, and how you can solve it as well. And thank you so much for the listening as well. Thank you. دكتور عبد العزيز.
ندري ان الان خلاص اخر اليوم end of the day, no energy left, but we still have 4 hours of a للمعرض للexhibit. So please save some energy and go and look at the exhibitors. Now we will do نوزع شهادات الشكر للمتحدثين فيعطيهم العافية. الدكتور زائد أحمد عسيري. الأستاذ عدنان بلالي. الأستاذ هادي كرير آسف. الدكتور مشاري العبد اللطيف. And that concludes our last session today. Thank you very much.